At the very beginning of 1943, as winter gripped the earth with its icy breath, the German defense began to show serious cracks on all fronts. From the snowy plains of Russia to the sun-scorched African deserts, the strategic initiative, like a pendulum swinging to the other side, had firmly shifted into the hands of the Red Army. The Leningrad front, trapped by ice and blockade, was no exception to this general rule. On January 12th, in the midst of a harsh winter, Operation Iskra, Spark, commenced here, aiming to break the blockade that had been suffocating the city on the Neva for over a year. The task facing the Soviet troops was titanic, almost impossible. During 16 long months of siege, the enemy had managed to create a deeply echeloned and extremely powerful defense, turning the approaches to Leningrad into a veritable fortress. Moreover, the Red Army had to cross the Neva River, frozen solid with a thick layer of ice that, according to engineers' estimates, could only support light armored vehicles. Therefore, the powerful T-34 and KV-1 tanks, capable of crushing enemy fortifications, could not be used in the initial stage of the operation. Support for the advancing infantry was provided by 148 light tanks and armored cars, which were more maneuverable and less demanding on the ice's strength. After a massive 140-minute artillery barrage that shook the earth and sky, units of the 67th Army, like a compressed spring, surged forward, striving to break the enemy's resistance. At the forefront of the attack by the 61st Tank Brigade, like the tip of an advancing wedge, moved a company of light T-60 tanks under the command of the young but already experienced Lieutenant Dmitry Osadyuk, born 1917. With roaring engines and clanking tracks, the company crossed the Neva, broke through the enemy's first line of defense under heavy fire, laboriously overcame treacherous peat bogs, and finally reached the edge of the forest, the strategically important Sinyavino Heights, which opened the way to the complete lifting of the blockade, were just a short distance away. But at that very moment, the Germans launched a powerful counterattack, throwing about 500 infantrymen into battle, supported by 3 shielded Panzer IV tanks. Against this force, the light T-60s, armed only with 20mm cannons, were practically powerless. Subscribe to our channel, like this video, and don't miss other exciting stories about World War II and the perspectives of all participants in those distant events. The 20mm guns of the T-60 could not penetrate the frontal armor of the German fours and could only hit the side armor at close range, 100 to 200 meters. But what experienced tanker would let the enemy get that close? As a result of a fierce battle, 2 T-60s were knocked out, the remaining vehicles were forced to withdraw, and Lieutenant Osadyuk's tank was cut off from his own. Dangerously close to the enemy, the German Panzer IVs, like predators sensing an advantage, began a veritable hunt for the lone Soviet tank. Osadyuk had practically no chance of surviving a direct clash with them. However, the 2-man T-60, thanks to its low weight, only 6 tons, possessed exceptional maneuverability, which gave it at least some chance of escape. Fortunately for Osadyuk, his tank was driven by a true virtuoso of his craft, Sergeant Ivan Makarenkov, born 1918. He drove the vehicle with incredible skill, as if dancing on the battlefield, performing unthinkable pirouettes and dodging enemy shells that exploded around him, showering the tank with fountains of snow and earth. At this critical moment, Osadyuk noticed that at the edge of the forest, like ghosts, appeared the guns of a battery of 45mm anti-tank guns. A bold, almost desperate plan instantly ripened in his mind. To lure the enemy under the fire of Soviet artillery, dance to the far edge of the forest. The lieutenant commanded Makarenkov in a voice that conveyed both firmness and hope. The driver, without losing a second, changed course, continuing to skillfully maneuver under a hail of enemy fire. Osadyuk, without ceasing for a moment, fired from his 20mm cannon, diverting the enemy's attention and maintaining the illusion of easy prey. The Germans, enraged that they could not destroy the seemingly defenseless tank, focused entirely on it. Not noticing the hidden threat, the artillerymen under the command of Senior Lieutenant Romanov, observing this unequal duel, quickly understood the Soviet tankers' plan and prepared for battle, loading their 45s with armor-piercing shells. Thanks to Makarenkov's skill, the T-60 managed to bring the German tanks to the ideal firing range, so that their sides, most vulnerable to the fire of Soviet guns, were facing the forest. Just a minute later, all three German Panzer IVs were engulfed in flames, their reinforced armor proving useless against the accurate and concentrated attack of the 45s. The incredible jump, seeing that the enemy tanks were destroyed, Osadiuk, in his battered but still combat-ready T-60, rushed to pursue the retreating German infantry. Deprived of armored support, the demoralized infantrymen hastily took cover in a small hollow, where they began to dig in. Trying to organize a defense, they met the Soviet tank with grenades, forcing Osadiuk and Makarenkov to retreat. The situation was critical. Only one narrow road led to the hollow, and the enemy had to be eliminated to fulfill the command's order and break through to the Sinyavino heights. In this tense situation, Makarenkov had a seemingly insane idea: to jump the tank from the edge of the cliff directly into the hollow, into the thick of the enemy. Lieutenant Osadiuk, assessing the situation and understanding that there were practically no other options, approved this risky plan. Sergeant Makarenkov, without wasting time, began to prepare for the jump, repeatedly driving up to the edge of the cliff, compacting the snow, and creating a kind of ski jump. When the improvised track was ready, the T-60, picking up speed like a skier off a ramp, made an incredible jump from a height of several meters and landed directly in the hollow, right in the midst of the enemy soldiers. Panic erupted in their ranks. Osadiuk, without losing a second, opened rapid fire from his cannon. The T-60's cannon had belt feed. Each belt held 58 rounds, and Osadiuk had 13 belts in total. Makarenkov, no less effectively complementing his commander's actions, masterfully controlled the tank, cutting circles in the hollow, as if on a carousel, preventing the enemy from recovering and organizing effective resistance. After making about 10 circles, the sergeant stopped the vehicle. By this time, only 40 to 50 German soldiers, realizing the hopelessness of their situation, surrendered to the arriving Soviet infantry. So much for a light tank. For this phenomenal feat, the courage displayed and military cunning, Lieutenant Osadiuk and Sergeant Makarenkov were awarded the high title of Hero of the Soviet Union. The fate of the heroes, Lieutenant Osadiuk's company was one of the first to meet with troops of the Fokhov Front on January 18, 1943. The historic event had taken place. The blockade of Leningrad was broken. However, on January 21st, Osadiuk's tank was hit by enemy fire. Despite the damage and danger, the officer managed to pull the seriously wounded Ivan Makarenkov from the burning vehicle, saving his life. In the hospital, the sergeant, unfortunately, had to have his leg amputated, and at the end of 1943, he was demobilized. After the war, Ivan Mihailovich Makarenkov lived in Lipetsk. Lieutenant Osadiuk's military career was also short-lived. In February 1943, he was seriously wounded and, after a long treatment, did not return to the front. They wanted to discharge him, but Dmitry Ivanovich insisted on remaining in the army. In 1947, he graduated from the Armored Tank School and continued his service. Dmitry Ivanovich Osadiuk retired in 1971 with the rank of colonel. He lived in Kirovograd. The hero friends, bound by the ties of frontline brotherhood, did not lose contact after the war, corresponding and meeting. Each of them lived a long and worthy life, surpassing the 80-year mark. Goodbye. We were glad to see you on our channel. Don't forget to leave comments, like, and subscribe.